Okay, good evening, colleagues, and welcome each and every single one of you to the fourth installation of this webinar series in preparation for the ALSISA Water and Sanitation Dialogue, which is going to be held from the 9th to the 12th of November at the Empress Palace in Johannesburg, South Africa. We'd like to welcome all of you, each and every one of you, warmly into this discussion that we are going to be having today. I'm hoping that each and every one of you is going to enjoy this dialogue, that you're all going to engage with us, with myself and the guest speaker, who I'm going to be introducing shortly. And we are going to interact and continue with the discussions further on the days of the dialogue. So I'd like to welcome each one of you. Today, we are going to be talking about rethinking infrastructure delivery management. And this is a very important discussion and topic in the South African context. So it's something that is very vital and very important to each one of us. And as people are joining in, they will be hearing more about our discussions today. Okay. First and foremost, I'd like to inform you that this discussion or this webinar is going to be kept and it's going to be shared with others after this. So by being part of this, you are accepting for us to transcribe and to record the webinar today. So please continue to join us and stay with us as we continue our discussions. My name is Mbali Sibiya. I work for Umgeni Utukela Water, where I am a process and quality technician. Today, we're going to be discussing a topic that is quite close to my heart, as it's going to touch on various things. So when we're talking about infrastructure management and development, it's something that touches various aspects of the water treatment and water and sanitation space. So we are hoping that you are going to engage very well with our host, or our speaker for today, who is Dr. Bethuel Netshiswinze. I'm hoping I'm not butchering his surname.
Netshiswinzhe.
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 Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Dr.
Thanks,
Bethuel. Thank you, Dr. Bethuel.
Don't worry.
I'm going to learn. I'll get it right. By the end of this evening, I will have it down packed.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping you're going to engage well with our esteemed speaker for tonight, and you are all going to enjoy the discussions that we are going to be having today. We all know that the water sector is generally at the heart of sustainable development. So we cannot talk about sustainability, we cannot talk about development without including water. And we know water infrastructure is not only about the pipes or the buildings or the water treatment facilities, but it's also about ensuring reliable supply of water. So these are some of the topics that we are going to be touching on today as we have our discussions with Dr. Bethuel. I'm hoping that these discussions, I know an hour is not a lot, so we're going to try and compress as much of the discussions as we can. But even though we are going to be compressing the discussions because of time, I'm still requesting from each one of you colleagues to engage with us in the chat session. And also towards the end of our discussion today, I'm going to ask from our administrators to allow you to make comments and to engage with our speaker today. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to introduce to you our esteemed guest, Dr. Bethuel Netshiswinzhe. Dr. Bethuel is a business management consultant and infrastructure delivery management specialist. He brings a range of skills in corporate strategy, business processes, re-engineering, digital transformation, enterprise risk management, corporate governance, development planning and management, program planning and development finance. He has over 25 years of experience in the infrastructure development sector. I know that this bio cannot ever do any justice to what Dr. Bethuel has done and what he currently is doing also. And I think the best thing for me is to allow Dr. Bethuel to come in. Dr. Bethuel, I'm not sure if you can be able to turn on your camera where you are, um, and maybe give us a glimpse of who Dr. Bethuel is and what you are about.
Yeah, thanks, Mbali. I've been struggling to switch on my video. I don't know what's happening with my laptop, but I saw this in the last few meetings that I've been having online. So, but I guess colleagues got to a view of my face in the advert that you guys circulated. So I'm sorry, I'm not able to switch on the video. It's I tried even now, it's not working. So I think you introduced me well, and I appreciate that. I couldn't have said it better. In summary, I define myself as an infrastructure delivery management practitioner based on my experience over years, and I think that will come through in the discussion. But Mbali, maybe if you allow, let me just contextualize the topic, rethinking infrastructure delivery management in the water sector. But not necessarily in the water sector, maybe in the infrastructure sector. So why do we need to rethink infrastructure delivery management? What are the driving forces that are getting us to rethink certain things in the way that we've been doing things? First of all, we need to appreciate that infrastructure is a critical underpinning for growth and development in any society. So we need a robust network of social and economic infrastructure to grow the economy, to create jobs, and to create or achieve our dream of a better life for all. So infrastructure is at the heart of this. But importantly, in terms of giving the context to the topic for me, we need to think about that, where are we going into the future? It is estimated that by 2050, Africa's population will reach around 2.5 billion people. That's nearly double the current population of about 1.46 billion. So with this trend, Africa will roughly account for about 25% of the share of global population. And we know from the research that we're looking at that the fastest growing regions are in the sub-Saharan Africa. And countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, DRC, Egypt, and Tanzania will see the largest increases in population. I mean, for example, it is expected that Nigeria will surpass 400 million people by 2050, making it the third most populous country in the world after India and China. And if we were to bring this home to South Africa, by 2050, the population is projected to be around 73 to 75 million people in South Africa. That is up from the 62 million people in 2025. And with growing urbanization, we are seeing that over 75% of South Africans will live in cities by 2050. So all these issues raise questions about how do we need to drive infrastructure delivery and development in a manner that we can respond to this situation, to this scenario. So while progress has been made since 1994, recent data shows that 71% of urban, but only 36% of rural residents have access to safely managed water. and 27% of rural residents lack basic sanitation. And if we were to put this back in terms of a continental perspective, which we are part of Africa, 418 million people still lack access to basic drinking water. And close to 800 million people do not have access to adequate sanitation. So this background is important to put into context the magnitude of the work that still needs to be done to achieve what we've been talking about all along, what we call universal access to water and sanitation. But furthermore, it is important to highlight other key driving forces to consider in rethinking infrastructure delivery management. Colleagues, we're currently in the midst of a great reset. Geopolitics are shifting, are changing, with protection of national interests on the top of the agenda. Economies are being reshaped. We're seeing trade wars through the tariff things. Supply chains are being rewired. Climate change is increasing with huge impact on the cost and the way of delivering infrastructure. And importantly, social expectations and norms are being revised. So that on its own, it means that we need to realign, we need to rethink about how do we do things, or do we deliver infrastructure in the manner in which we can meet the needs of the people. But we're also seeing that there's a large financing gap and growing debt crisis. And this makes traditional public-only delivery model unsustainable. Africa needs to mobilize domestic capital and smarter blended finance to close the funding gap. It is estimated that a total need for funding in Africa to close the infrastructure gap and the funding gap is between 130 to 170 billion US dollars annually that we need to mobilize to do this. I'm also saying that the way in which infrastructure projects are currently being done is riddled with challenges. Just to flag a few, because we will come back to this issue in the fullness of the discussion, Mbali. What we're seeing, and just to highlight a few of those issues, and as I say, we'll lean in more on them. We see that there's weak project preparation and poor upstream planning. Not enough feasibility and bankable structuring is being done. And this is a major cause for cost overruns and project failure. We're seeing fragmentation and weak collaboration. We're seeing weak portfolio oversight. And that means that in managing what we're doing, there's just no visibility of what is being done, even at the level of the entities, the utilities or departments. Our systems that we're using don't allow for that visibility of the full portfolio. We're seeing that there's non-compliance with the regulatory frameworks. This is so important in our South African situation where the sector, the industry is highly regulated. And we will come back to this point in terms of what are the regulations and the frameworks that the government have put forward to guide and structure how we should plan, design, and manage infrastructure that are not being fully complied with. We're seeing a disconnect between capital projects and asset management. So we tend to focus more on new builds, and we're neglecting the maintenance of existing assets. And this is evident across the country. And it's strange that when we travel to other countries, you see infrastructure that has been built over years that is well maintained and looked after. We are continuing to see use of disconnected and legacy manual systems to manage infrastructure that do not allow for the efficiencies that are required for us to manage the type of programs that we're doing. It is therefore my view that in the midst of this ongoing fundamental change, as leaders across sectors of society, we need to be clear-sighted and willing to consider new ways of doing things. This means taking risks. It calls for visionary leadership. And we are saying that it cannot be business as usual. So, Mbali, if I'm to come back to your question, if I understood it well, your first question about my background and experience in the water sector and how I got to be where I am and what we're doing now, let me talk to that. And I'm going to limit it in relation to the water sector. So between 1998 and 2003, I worked for the Mbali Trust, first as the head of monitoring and evaluation, and then I became director of policy. Mbali Trust is one of the NGOs that really played a crucial role in contributing to shaping the water and sanitation sector in South Africa, especially regarding to community-based water schemes. We, as Mbali Trust at the time, started playing this role before municipalities were formally established. We know that municipalities were formally established as we know them today around 1998 with the passage of the Local Government Municipal Structures Act. As Mbali Trust, we played a big role in contributing to the development of water services and policies as informed by the Water Services Act of 1997. I want to highlight one of the things that stands out in the work that I did there, which was really at the heart of water sector. We got involved in what we called at the time a build, operate, and transfer program that was implemented in different provinces around the country. This involved mobilizing private sector capacity to implement water schemes in rural areas. And it is therefore interesting to note that very early on, there was appetite to crowd in private sector participation in the delivery of water and sanitation, which are things that we are even continuing to talk more of that now. So after Mbali Trust, I joined the Development Bank of Southern Africa, responsible for managing public sector investment operations of the bank in the provinces that I was responsible for, which was largely Gauteng, Northwest, and Limpopo. We worked with a number of municipalities and other SOEs to finance their infrastructure programs, including water and sanitation. And the DBSA continues to do this work even today. But what I want to highlight during my time at the DBSA, one project that stands out was an innovative approach that we developed to eradicate the bucket system in the Northwest Province. It was a very interesting model that we came up with to do what we call front loading of provincial infrastructure grants and later on municipal infrastructure grants. And for this to happen at the time, National Treasury had to issue specific treasury regulations to allow municipalities to front load their future MIG allocations in order to raise capital. This was very important for the municipalities with limited borrowing capacity. And it is still the case even today. So Mbali, this is how I got into the water sector. After DBSA, I moved then into the core public service, where I joined the Department of Infrastructure Development in Gauteng. And I then got exposed to managing infrastructure delivery. And how can we be innovative by introducing alternative ways in which we can deliver infrastructure off balance sheet of the province. And we attempted quite a number of things that we do that I can talk about later. But let me limit my discussion to the water sector. But I'm sure other questions will come later. Thanks, Mbali.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Bethuel, for such a comprehensive introduction also to our topic today, as well as to yourself and your experience. I'm sure that this is now going to guide the discussions that we're going to have today, and also the interactions that we're going to be getting from our webinar attendees, who I know they're already ready to ask you questions and to interact with you. So thank you so much for sharing your experience and how you ended up or are being part of the water sector and the impacts that you have created along the way. I think also, just also for context purposes, Dr. Bethuel, we'd like to know, like in your role as the managing director now and senior engagement manager at Blue IQ Services, how do you see consulting and advisory services influencing real world change in the water sector? If you are going to put into context what you've shared with us now in terms of the challenges that the sector is actually having when it comes to water and sanitation infrastructure or infrastructure in general.
Yeah, thanks, Mbali. That's a very good question. And I think for us, as players in the sector now, it just allows us to really talk about the value that we add and what we do. And generally, even outside our own firm, Blue IQ Services, consulting and advisory firms play a significant role in influencing change across sectors. We often see ourselves as catalysts for transformation and change. But more specifically to your question and the main roles that we play as consulting and advisory firms, I'll highlight about 5 or 6 points in terms of what we do in the space. So one, we provide strategic guidance, what we call strategic advisory services. What it means is that we help organizations to define their vision, their mission, and long-term strategies. What in the normal workings of the entities and utilities in the water sector becomes what is your corporate plan, which is usually a 5 to 10-year plan, business strategy. We help to then translate global trends from the research work that we do, looking at what is happening across the globe. For example, the issue of digital transformation. How do we translate that into actionable strategies that organizations can implement and transform their operations for efficiency and effectiveness? 2, we help to manage change management. So it is given that one of the things that we have to deal with as a society is change. Change is ongoing. So we support, or consulting firms support organizations in navigating transitions, such as restructuring and adopting new technologies. We provide frameworks based on science, based on evidence, based on research to manage change. 3, we provide expertise and we help with knowledge transfer, where we bring specialized knowledge that organizations may lack internally, and thereby introduce new tools, new innovation, new methodologies, and new technologies that can be adopted to improve the operations. 4, we really help to drive innovation where we expose organizations to global trends and what we call disruptive solutions to help organizations to explore and develop new business models to continue to adapt and to be relevant and respond to the needs. Importantly, we also play a key role, or consulting firms play a key role in policy and regulatory influence. We do this by providing socioeconomic analysis, feasibility and viability studies to guide reforms on policy frameworks and regulatory changes. We help to shape policy debates through research and insights that we continue to gather. And lastly, the point I want to talk about, we help with risk and performance management, where we help organizations to identify risks, either financial, operational, or reputational risk and other risk, and propose mitigation strategies on how those risks can be dealt with. So that's the role that I see as consulting firms, which we should be seen, and we are, and partners in the delivery value chain of infrastructure. So that's what we do. Thanks, Mbali.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Bethuel, for sharing that with us. And this is actually very important to the discussions that we are going to be having today, because we're really going to delve into the challenges that South Africa is actually facing when it comes to infrastructure within the water and sanitation space, and also into achieving that 2030 goal of sustainable or equitable access to water and sanitation for all. So if we want to get to that level, we really do need to put into practice some of the elements that you have outlined for us today so far. But we're going to go into more details about that as we go along. Dr. Bethuel, I'd like for us to really get into the current challenges and maybe also the lessons learned that you may be able to highlight for us from other countries that we have seen and that we might like to implement going forward in South Africa, so that we meet these challenges head on and we provide adequate mitigation strategies to provide what we really need for our country when we are going to be talking about sustainability. So maybe let's start with what the key challenges are. Let's go more into detail. I know you did highlight them for us a bit earlier on, but let's go into details about what these key challenges are when we are looking at infrastructure for water delivery. And maybe also from your vantage point, what are the biggest structural and operational challenges in water infrastructure delivery today?
Yeah, thanks, Mbali. I'm going to lean in more on these two questions. These two questions that you're asking. What are the key challenges currently faced in infrastructure delivery in the water sector, but also maybe in general? And the second question talked to, from my vantage point, what are the biggest structural and operational challenges in the sector that we see? So I will sit on this and talk to this. So often what we do as consulting firms in the industry, we do a lot of research to study the trends of what is happening in the industry with a view that we want to contribute to helping improvement in infrastructure delivery. So I will answer this question by then responding to a question to myself of why infrastructure projects fail. And I have identified about 10 points to this. So this will then help to say what are the key challenges, and I will then share some of the ideas from ourselves or from research of what we can do to improve this, to deal with these challenges that we're faced with in the industry, in the sector. So one challenge that we have is that there's likely to no project planning. And you'll hear me throughout my discussion, I'm going to talk a lot about planning. So we usually say that if you plan, you're planning to fail. So what we see is poor project planning and preparation. And we are saying that that is a leading root cause of infrastructure project failure. So what we need to do is we need to focus more on what we call front-end loading work to make sure that projects are properly prepared and we get them to implementation ready stage before we rush into construction stage. So often in the public sector, with the pressures that we're sitting with to respond to the backlogs that we have, we think that an idea is a project and we're rashly quick to implement an idea. So we all have ideas, but I can tell you firmly, so ideas are not projects. There's work that we need to get that into a project. So practical experience from my previous work, especially in Gauteng, we developed a tool that we call Project Readiness Matrix, where we looked across all the 6 stages and break down the tasks and activities that have to be done per stage to level 4 or the lowest possible level of understanding what needs to be done to move from one stage to another using our delivery framework, which is stage gate model, meaning that for you to move from one stage to another, we need to have fulfilled certain things fully that needs to be done at initiation, at concept design, and so on. So I'm saying there's a problem with the project planning. Secondly, there's a lack of project leadership and stakeholder alignment. And this results in poor decision-making and, of course, then project failure. For the kind of work that we do, which are big, mega capital projects, we need executive project sponsorship with the right experience, capabilities, and level of leadership and stakeholder influence. So it's not enough to structure a project, and I'll come back later to this when we talk about governance, to say you've got a project manager. A project manager is at the operational level. This program or at a portfolio level, they require executive sponsor that understand what needs to be done. And we're seeing that usually don't happen. And the project manager is usually just left on their own. And this creates a lot of problems and challenges. Thirdly, we see a lot of poor project governance, or what we call project governance ambiguity. And this leads to project failure in a big way. And often it comes through weaknesses in procurement processes and how projects are structured and managed. Because governance arrangements so in financing infrastructure projects, we talk about a project structure. So a project structure would then define the institutional arrangement of where that project sits and where is the governance relationship compared to operational project management relationship. And this is often neglected and not done properly. We usually just assume that within your organizational structure, you've got governance, but that governance is more corporate governance that we're talking about. So we're talking about projects governance here. Fourthly, we also see lack of project resource planning. So due to poor planning in the beginning, we don't really identify what are the resource requirements and what kind of cross-functional teams and expertise and capabilities that we need to execute the project. The fifth point I want to highlight is that there's also misalignment between design and construction interface. This is, for me, one of the biggest of the challenges, where design happens somewhere of course, construction, we just leave it to contractors after the tender period. But we're saying that these things must be looked at right in the beginning, where we need to ensure coordination, collaboration, and sufficient involvement of the right professionals across the value chain to ensure that project design and construction interface happens properly. Number 6, the other challenge that we see is the issue of poor project cost estimates. And based on research and data that we are looking at, recent data shows that infrastructure projects on average exceed business case cost estimate by 7%. Additionally, 10% of the project costs go over the estimated cost by 49% or more. So this becomes a really big issue. That's when then you have to deal with a lot of variation orders, and there are limits that Treasury has put in terms of how much variation can happen. But it's taking us back to the issue of scope definition and planning in the beginning. And that's actually my next point, number 7, the issue of poor definition of scope. That anything that is not included in the scope of work definitely becomes a subject of variation order in the construction contract management. So we need to invest a lot of time in the upfront work that we need to do to make sure that the scope is defined, is clear, is tight, to limit variations that can happen later on. The other point I want to highlight is construction contract ambiguity. Construction contracts are very complicated or complex, and they tend to be full of ambiguities. So we should aim to avoid ambiguities in drafting these contracts. In my view, this can be achieved by using standard industry contracts, such as FIDIC. And FIDIC, we're talking about in fullness of it, FIDIC has got different modules. You've got the red book that talks to employer design type of projects. You've got the yellow book, which is more contractor design projects, and you've got a silver book that talks to your EPC turnkey projects. So within organizations, we need to develop capacity to understand these contracts. And I see, and I think it's correctly right, that in the water sector, in terms of what water boards in the main are doing, FIDIC tend to be much more suited in that space. But there's also what we call NEC, new engineering contracts, that has been developed now over time, that most people favor a lot. We use a lot of that in my previous life. Because it's developed, and I don't want to promote any of what I'm talking about, but the NEC contract tends to be user-friendly in the language, and you'll therefore avoid those ambiguities that I'm talking about. It's written by project managers, the origination of it, as opposed to engineers and lawyers. And then, of course, we've got JBCC, that is commonly known in the industry, but that's largely used for buildings. But what I'm saying, the point I'm saying here, to avoid these ambiguities in contract management, is to standardize how you contract and make sure that we've got a template that we can use and that we can customize where needed. Number 9, the other point that I want to raise, Mbali, in terms of the challenges, is project risks that are inappropriately allocated. Infrastructure projects on their own, they involve significant level of risk with potentially major consequences. So project risk assessment should be completed and done fully at initiation stage and continually reviewed throughout the life cycle. The last point on this, Mbali, that I want to talk to is the nature in which the industry is fragmented. For me, one of the barriers to efficient infrastructure delivery is the nature and the extent of fragmentation in the manner in which projects are planned, designed and delivered. So what we need to do is to adopt an integrated infrastructure delivery model. And I didn't talk about my profile. You didn't mention this, but in the introduction, I have a book that I've authored that is about a model for infrastructure, for integrated infrastructure delivery in developing economies, that talks about an integrated model. And I think later on I can come to this point where I talk about what is an integrated infrastructure delivery. So that's where we talk about the need to see infrastructure as a system of systems. So we call this a systems approach to infrastructure development. And what it means is that we cannot look at infrastructure as isolated standalone projects. Like you look at a road as a standalone thing, a dam as a dam, a power station as a standalone. But we need to view this as interconnected parts of a broader system that supports society, the economy, and the environment. So instead of focusing on delivering a single asset, the approach should be to focus on integration, on interdependencies, and long-term sustainability. It is really about recognizing interconnections between the different assets. So power supply, for example, affects water delivery. ICT supports transport, logistics, and etc. So this is what we need to start looking at. So, Mbali, if you allow, because your question was two-pronged, the second part of the question was about what are the biggest structural and operational challenges in the water infrastructure delivered today. So I can proceed to talk to that. What I want to say is that the challenges are many. And the challenges, by the way, are well documented. What we need is really the political will to address those challenges head on. So what are some of those challenges? Just to highlight few, I'll highlight about 7 points here in terms of the challenges that we're seeing that are affecting the sector. We are faced with a situation of aging and inadequate infrastructure. We have a problem of old pipelines, water treatment plants, and limited investment in upgrades and maintenance. And we'll talk about, I think, the issue of maintenance later on as we go, because we need to talk about how do we get the balance right between new and existing, even to the level of how do we budget, how do we structure our budget to align to that. Secondly, in terms of some of the structural and operational challenges, we have in our country historical backlogs that we're still dealing with 30 years into our dispensation. Rural and peri-urban areas still face limited access to reliable water. And we see that the legacy of apartheid spatial planning is really still contributing to uneven distribution of infrastructure. Thirdly is the point that I mentioned earlier on of fragmented institutional framework, where there are overlapping roles between national, provincial, municipal, and water boards or water institutions. And this is characterized by weak coordination and collaboration between the key role players. But fourthly, we're also seeing that there are financial constraints in the industry. We know for a fact that municipalities are struggling with revenue collection, resulting in them owing huge amounts to water boards. I mean, water boards, I think the figure that I have and that I can mention here, over 22 billion rand is owed to water boards by municipalities. So these are the matters that cannot be left unattended, because then the industry is not sustainable. Because the important point that I want to emphasize on this issue, Mbali, and it's a very important one, is that if a water board collapses, one single board collapses, it's not about who's owing them. It's about the area of service. That service will collapse. So few municipalities can collapse service delivery in the province of KwaZulu-Natal because you are owed huge amount of money by 1, 2, 3 municipalities. So it's a very important matter that we need to look at. Fifthly, we're also seeing poor maintenance and the issue of water losses. Non-revenue water is estimated at about 40% of nationally. This is a scary figure, but this is the figure that we know, and we've been talking about this for a long time. And where does it come from? It comes from the fact that our focus is on reactive maintenance. Reactive maintenance dominates instead of preventative approaches that can allow us to assess how assets are functioning and performing real time. But there are weaknesses in terms of doing that. My sixth point, we also seeing a challenge of skills shortage. So I'm quite excited about what you are doing, Mbali. You said, yeah, water process control, I think that's what you said. We don't have enough of you. We don't have enough engineers. We don't have enough technicians. And this is where there's a misalignment between our educational institutions, even your TVET colleges and technical institutions, that are we really aligned to training people that can then be aligned to the industry needs and be job ready and get there to do the work. It's another discussion that we need to have. Lastly, on this point, I want to say that one point at the center of this is that there's weak governance. Mismanagement and procurement irregularities is a huge challenge that is contributing to the challenges that we're facing in the water sector. So thanks, Mbali. I think I've covered the 2 points the way I understood you so far.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bethuel, for that, and for also sharing those challenges that we have in our country that are quite also aligned with what is actually happening globally and what we are seeing in terms of water space and water service provision. Quite close to my heart also is the issue of the misalignments of academia or academic institutions and what they have to offer for industry, and that it just does not speak to each other and does not provide for that. And it's one of the projects that I've also been working on with some academic colleagues to try and bridge those gaps so that we have that speaking to what the sector actually needs and will ensure sustainability going forward in the future. So that is something quite interesting to look at and say that this is one of the challenges that we've highlighted among those critical ones when it comes to the infrastructure and infrastructure development. Colleagues, please don't forget to please interact with us on the chats. I'm not seeing any chats coming from you. And maybe the administration team can also alert me if there's any questions in the chat box for Dr. Bethuel as we go along, so that we can involve you in this discussion, because this is not just a one-on-one between myself and Dr. Bethuel, but we'd like you to take you along as we continue to have these discussions. Doc, we've spoken about the challenges that we're seeing in our country. So I'd like for us to drill in a little bit onto the strategies for effective delivery. So if we want to bridge that gap and we want to ensure that we're delivering consistently and sustainably, and also we are closing that gap that currently exists right now in terms of, we were speaking about municipalities owing water boards and water boards now not being able to deliver ultimately to the communities and provide water provision. So those are quite critical things, and it means that we're not getting anywhere closer to that sustainability that we've been aiming towards. And we know it's just a few short years to 2030. And when we're speaking about our sustainable development goals, we aiming to have achieved that by 2030. So we want to look at effective strategies for delivery going forward. So maybe let's talk about what practical approaches can actually help us to strike that balance between investing in new infrastructure versus maintaining and rehabilitating existing assets, because this is one of the challenges that you highlighted for us today, saying we have a challenge with that maintenance. And also looking at resource constraint context. So we've spoken about how our water boards are not getting that funding. There isn't those robust funding frameworks that are available. So what is it? What practical approach can help us to strike that balance?
Yeah, thanks, Mbali. There's really a lot of things that can be done. And in my view, a whole lot of those things that needs to be done, we know what needs to be done. And maybe what we're lacking is, as I say, is the will to do what needs to be done. So if I understand your question in particular, it's about the balance between maintaining and existing infrastructure system. Is that correct? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes. Looking at, Doc, what practical approaches can actually help us to strike that balance between investing in new infrastructure versus maintaining and rehabilitating existing assets?
Yes. So there is, as I say, there's a lot of things that we can do, and we commonly know these things that needs to be done. And do we have the will and the capabilities to do that? So if we're talking around issues of maintenance in particular and new capital projects, in my view, we need to, one, adopt a life cycle approach where we need to shift from a build and forget mindset to what we call a whole of life asset management. So when we plan projects right from the beginning, we should plan with a view of maintaining those assets, especially that the infrastructure we're talking about has got a long lifespan. This thing can last 40, 50, 60, even 100 years. So you don't plan maintenance after the asset has been done. So the approach is what we call life cycle planning. Two, I think we need to prioritize maintenance as an investment. So usually we see maintenance as an expense. So I'm saying that we need to treat maintenance and rehabilitation and upgrading of assets as a capital investment, and therefore give it the priority that it requires. But also saying that thirdly, we need to have data-driven asset management systems where we use digital tools that provide real-time monitoring of asset condition and performance. So you have a car, your car warns you when it's due for maintenance. You can ignore it at your own peril. So we need to do that also in terms of our infrastructure systems, especially in the water and other sectors, that you've got systems that can tell us the performance and what we need to do going forward. Fourthly, it's important that we need to balance budget allocation and develop and implement a maintenance to new ratio policy. What it means is we need to think about what percentage of infrastructure budget should be allocated to maintenance vis-a-vis new capital projects. And I can tell you with no doubt that the practice we've had for so many years, and you know better in your own institutions, the larger budget goes into new capital programs, and very little goes into maintenance. And my wish is to flip that around and get 60-40 going into maintenance of our existing assets, and new capital projects being 40% of what we have to do. So, but we need to get that mindset shift to get to this point, and to get to a point where we institutionalize this as a way of doing things. But maybe we still have a long way to go. So those are some of the things that we need to consider. But broadly speaking, if we're looking at other challenges in terms of key factors that our industry should be looking at to improve delivery, there are a number of things, again, that we can look at, and none of those things are rocket science. It is things that we know and that we must do. We need to strengthen planning and prioritization. And to do this, we need to focus on long-term infrastructure master plans. So infrastructure that we're talking about has got long lead time, long lifespan. So we need to plan this in terms of what we're going to do. As I started with my introduction of where we're going. 2050, we're going to have about 75 million people in South Africa. What does it mean in terms of water and sanitation infrastructure that we need to plan today for that population? So we need to have that master plan. With some of the travel that some of us have done, I've seen, and if you look, one of my best case study is Singapore in terms of their long-term development planning. And everything is digital, is online. You can see where the country is going. And it's available for the public. You can see the plan and you can see what they're planning to do where. So together with this, I'm saying that we need to focus on impact investing, where the goal is not only to generate financial returns, but to deliver positive, measurable social and environmental development impacts. We need to improve governance and national capacity, where we establish clearly defined governance and national arrangements, where we reduce bureaucracy and streamline approval processes. So there is just so much red tape in the system that we can, especially with the technology that we have today. We need to enhance procurement and contract management. I spoke about this, but the point I want to make here is that we can adopt digital procurement systems for efficiency and accountability. And as I said earlier on, consider use of standard contracts. We need to relook at diversifying funding and investment models. So there has been some examples of triple Ps in this country, but I think they're not enough. Furthermore, we need to explore blended finance. What it means is mixing public, private, and grant funding to attract investors, private investors, to play in the industry. But importantly, we also need to ensure predictable budgets for infrastructure. My own direct experience has been this stop and start funding allocation mechanisms. And it becomes just too costly to start a project that you can stop because there's just not enough budget. The other point I want to raise is that we need to adopt technology and innovation. There's a lot of available technologies that we can use to improve the way that we do things. There's what we call the BIM, the Building Information Modeling, that helps a lot in doing the design and planning stage. But there's also a lot that we can do in terms of project tracking and project monitoring. Not only at the project level, but starting from portfolio program to asset management and project management processes. The other point I want to raise that we often overlook, because we kind of like think that we've done it, is really we can't neglect to promote community and stakeholder engagement. We need to involve communities early in our processes to ensure buy-in and social acceptance. We need to engage local businesses at local level to create jobs, develop skills, but to also make them part of the developments that are happening in their own communities. Lastly, on this point, I want to say that we need to create that balance of maintenance and sustainability, where we shift from only building new assets to maintaining existing infrastructure. And it's done. I mean, the methodologies and the tools are there. It's what we call life cycle costing approaches instead of short-term budgeting. Thanks, Mbali.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bethuel, for sharing with us that insights. We are getting some engagement in our chats, and I would like to just read two of the questions for you. There is Dr. DM here. Dr. DM is saying, what role can accelerated artisan training play in infrastructure maintenance in the country?
Okay. Yes, I think, Mbali, you can even respond to that question even better than me. But I spoke to the issue of shortage of skills, special technical skills in the value chain, especially at local government level. So we are seeing that there is really a need to have technical skills in the industry, water process controllers, plumbers, and so on, electrician to play. So is the models in which how we do this. I think I had it in my notes somewhere where I was going to talk about the rainwater SPV model. But it's the space is there, and the challenge is how do we then bring in? And often also we find, I think according to the question that Dr. DM is raising, the skills are there. It's how do we crowd them in? So that's where yourself as utilities, government entities, SOEs, we need to have a structured ways in which we then mobilize skills. Our view, and that's on my view also, we're sitting in the private sector, even in our small spaces, even in the company like mine. The only capital that we have is knowledge. We've got huge knowledge that we can deploy to help improve the system. So, yeah, Mbali, that's my attempt to answer the question.
No, thank you for that, Dr. Bethuel. And also in response to you, Dr. DM, it's actually very, very important for us as the water sector in general to be intentional about the kind of training that we provide and not just leave it to the academic institutions to train for us. But we need to ensure that even though they are training facilities, they are curriculums that are provided for training artisans, specifically for maintenance and such, that maintenance speaks directly to the water sector. So we really need to be more intentional as we go forward with this type of training and ensure that the artisans that come out of these institutions come out fit and ready for the water sector. So that is something that the sector needs to invest in going forward. Yes, and they need to be very strong about it because this is the future of the sector after all. And we must not just leave it up to the institutions that they will just train in general. And we're going to go a little bit into innovations and technology, and you'll see Dr. DM, where this actually comes into play, because we need now artisans and technicians, etc., who are fit for the sector, who know the type of technology, the type of innovation that we're introducing to the sector and the purpose for it, and who are fit for purpose. So that's my take on that. And maybe let's take one more in the chat. There's Obakeng Mukhopa. Hi, Obakeng. He's got a question there saying, is there successful global models for balancing maintenance and rehabilitation? Dr. Bethuel?
Yeah, So I haven't really seen a particular case study. I maybe read it. I'm sure other colleagues that are here, I've not checked who's here, can come in and help. But we have seen, I was referring to the example of Singapore, a very small country of about 11 million people or so. But what you see is that everything works. And for me, it takes back to what I was talking about, the need for proper planning, life cycle approach to planning. So there are things that are working out there and that can work, that we can learn from. So that's why sometimes when we talk about, we travel a lot as South Africans, and it's just that when we come back, I don't know whether we forget what we've seen or we're not looking to learn those lessons. There are models that work, that we can learn from. So there are.
Thank you for that, Dr. Bethuel. I think, yes, it's something that we need to work on as South Africans, because we do benchmark quite a bit. We network, we try to learn from the best. I know that you did give us just a tidbit there about what they are doing in Singapore in terms of that digital and innovation that they're introducing. Where it's not just an institutional thing, but it's a countrywide thing where everyone actually knows and they are able to access this data and type of information. And that is where we want to go going forward. But we learn these things, we see that they are working in other countries, but the will to implement, I think, yeah, I'm going to always come back to what you said earlier on, is there a will? Are we willing to actually implement these things? Because we've learned about them and we've seen them in action, and them being implemented successfully in other countries. Okay, so that brings me to the next topic, which is going to be about innovation and technology, Dr. Bethuel. We're looking at, just looking at innovation and technologies. What are the most effective digital technologies that are being used now? And what role do they play in transforming the way the infrastructure delivery is managed and executed in the water sector?
Yeah, thanks, Mbali. So I just got a chart here on the side of who Dr. DM is. He can answer the question that he asked. He's a good colleague in the industry that I know very well. It was a question about what role can, what was he talking about? SMME's affiliation can play in the planning. You can answer that in the chat or in the discussion. So we're going to the issue of Mbali, the innovation and technology. That's the question you're asking now. So there are a lot of technologies. Where we are today, and we've seen this, and it kind of like when we look back now, we see how some of the disasters that we had, COVID being an example, although disastrous it was, accelerated some of the technologies, the same platform that we're using here today. We didn't have it 5 years, 4 years ago. But in the infrastructure sector, what are some of the technologies that are emerging that we can use and benefit from? There's few that I want to highlight, and I spoke to one already. There's the building information modeling, which is very useful for us to create what we call 3D and 4D models for better design, planning, and coordination. So it allows to make sure that design stage, detailed design stage, and even concept design, the multidisciplinary team is able to share and work on the same platform and get inputs from different disciplines and specialists to influence the design. So this is there, and I'm sure some of you are already using this technology. Secondly, there's what we call GIS and remote sensing. That is used to map the terrain, the population trends, and environmental risk. So you can do this from a technology platform to assess and to gather that data so that it informs our planning and what we want to do. Thirdly, what I want to highlight is what we call digital twins. Basically, these are virtual replicas of infrastructure assets and systems that allows us to simulate performance, optimize designs, and anticipate problems that we have. So what it means that for your pipelines, for your water treatment plants, you can have a digital twin. That's why it's called twin. That system digital that you can then maneuver and play around it. And this is also very useful for training purposes, for people to understand and demonstrate how a water treatment plant works or how is it designed, those kind of things. There's a drones technology. So most of us maybe use drones for leisure, but drones are very useful in the industry, in the infrastructure space. And I have a direct experience here where we were one of the first departments in the country to use drone technology for surveying, site inspections, and monitoring construction progress when I was at Gauteng Department of Infrastructure Development. So we know now they're being used for so many things. It's a technology that is fully proven that we can use and integrate in our infrastructure delivery value chain. Importantly, lastly, there is also, in terms of operation and maintenance, computerized asset management systems then provide for a centralized digital platform to track condition, usage, and performance of assets. So, Mbali, we're not short of technology where we are today. I think where we're short of is the usage, and for us to learn how to use the technology. So, of course, most of us were born before this technology, and we tend to have some fear in how we interact with it. But there's no other way. The future is technology. And what we are saying now is that what I've spoken about above here, this technology can be embedded with AI, artificial intelligence, that it can be interactive. You can communicate with it, can guide you, you can ask questions, and it can give you very valuable information that on your own it will take you a number of days to get. So that's how technology is moving going forward. Thanks, Mbali.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bethuel. I see here in the chat, and Gumbo had also asked something about the disruptive technologies that we mentioned earlier on. That's what are the leading tech solutions that industry is using as early warning leak detection to address the 40% loss in leaks that you spoke of?
Yes. So I will not mention specific names because I don't want to market any, but there's so many. You can just Google this. There's just so many technologies that allows us to be able to track and monitor the performance of our infrastructure. So talking about this thing of remote sensing is technologies that are fully developed. That there are cameras that you can put in your pipelines and they can scan and give you images real time of what is happening in your infrastructure system. So one of the things that we advocate for is to have a centralized platform, even in a physical space where you can have what politicians call this war rooms and so on. So in my previous life, we created what we called an infrastructure house, which was a room that is equipped with technology that you can then link what your drones are capturing in the field into that facility, and you can see real time what is happening on site. So technologies are there. What we need to cultivate is the appetite and understanding and the appropriateness and relevance of the technology that we need to use for our environment and where we are. So we are not short of technology. Thanks.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Bethuel. That is indeed true. There are definitely vast amounts of innovations out there that can be implemented, but it's things that we need to learn and also to accept that change, that this is a change and we need to go with it and move with it. and develop ourselves going forward. But I think there are also a lot of things you did speak about this earlier on, that there's a lot of red tape when it comes to policies and implementation thereof of policies and procedures within the infrastructure space. And that leads us to the governance and accountability. So in your view, what systemic reforms or practices could strengthen governance, accountability, and transparency in municipal water departments and in the water boards, if we are to get to the stage where we are saying that we're heading in the right direction?
Okay. Thanks, Mbali. Without maybe in the risk of repeating what I said earlier on, let me talk to that. So talking about measures that we can implement to improve governance and accountability. It is really important to appreciate that governance and accountability is at the heart of our current water crisis in South Africa. So issues like poor governance, poor maintenance, non-revenue water losses, and weak institutional capacities are undermining service delivery. So what do we need to do? A few points to highlight there. One, we need to strengthen institutional capacity. So we need to professionalize municipal water utilities and support struggling municipalities with regional water utilities to pool expertise and resources. So water cuts across boundaries, and this issue of regional utilities, we need to look at it quite seriously, because that capacity cannot reside at a very local municipality in rural areas sometimes. So the point I'm saying is that we need to strengthen institutional capacity. And again, this is not new information, we know this. The second point I want to raise is that we need to improve transparency and data management. We need to improve real-time monitoring systems, use of open data dashboards, showing supply, consumption, finances, and progress and project progress. So that's again is linking back to the question we were speaking about earlier on of technology and visibility and transparency on the work that we do. Thirdly, I want to say that we need financial accountability, or strengthen our financial accountability. We need to consider fostering strict audit and reporting standards for municipal finances. And these things are already there in terms of our regulations, MFMA and so on. But one of the things that is being spoken about now, we need to consider ring-fencing water revenues so that they are not diverted to other uses. We need to strengthen billing systems to reduce non-revenue water. So I think one area that in the next 5-10 years that we really need to zoom into is what is happening at local government level. There's also a need for some regulatory reforms. And here we should welcome reforms that are underway to professionalize the sector. The move towards licensing of the function of being a water service provider is a step in the right direction. So where we're coming from, it was almost given that a WSP is a municipality or any other, but I think the new move now is to say that you need to be licensed based on capabilities to be a WSP. For me, the other point, we need to look at long-term sustainability. And the point that I was raising earlier on, we need to prioritize asset management and maintaining existing infrastructure. And with that, we need to also incorporate climate resilience and risk management into water governance. Because the issues of climate change with all these floods and weather patterns changing, what it does is cost to replace that infrastructure that has been lost. So we need to build infrastructure that can be resilient to that. Importantly, again, I mentioned this point earlier on, citizen and stakeholder engagement is important. We need to strengthen community engagement and providing feedback to communities on issues of water use. Thanks, Mbali.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Bethuel, for that. And thank you to the colleagues for keeping the comments and questions in the chats coming. We're getting a lot of interaction, Dr. Bethuel, in our chats, and I can see that colleagues really want to keep the discussion going. But I know my colleagues at our sister had actually given me very limited time for this webinar, but it just keeps coming and coming. So I think everyone is going to be looking forward to continuing with the engagement at the dialogue in November, and to continuing to engage with you, Dr. Bethuel, going forward as well. And I'm hoping also from our colleagues from Alcisa that they might even allow you to respond to those questions and post them on the Alcisa side, so that the colleagues can see the responses that you have provided to the questions that they've raised today, because there are a lot of questions that are coming through regarding technology and introduction of AI, etc. So questions from Jacob, from Dr. Mtombeni, relating to the use of technology in AI when it comes to academics and to training, introducing digital platforms for simulations, etc. So those are the types of questions, Dr. Bethuel, that you should be looking forward to responding to our participants for tonight, as we might not have the time that we would like to share to continue sharing the discussions in this topic today. Okay, I think the second last question before we close for tonight that I'd like for us to actually touch on is regarding the collaborations and partnerships. And we spoke about that a lot during our talk today, where we spoke about governments, and we spoke about water boards, as well as you touched a bit on public-private partnerships, blended finance, and co-funding with development banks, etc., which are some of the models that have been used and they've been effective elsewhere. There are also emerging models that include green bonds, etc., climate adaptation funds, as you spoke about, trying to work towards building climate resilience now, especially when it comes to our infrastructure. So my question here is, how can governments, water boards, and the private sector work more effectively together to close the infrastructure gaps that we currently have? And could you maybe share examples of partnerships that have delivered tangible results or outputs?
Yeah, thanks, Mbali. Very exciting discussion. I'm quite excited. And I can talk almost non-stop about these issues. So some of the issues really that we are looking at as solutions are not necessarily new. So first, if we look at private-public partnership, it's something that is there globally. But in South Africa, we have had our own challenges in terms of our appetite for triple Ps. And there's been very, very few in the water sector, triple Ps, that we've seen. And we are saying that it is really a collaborative approach between public and private entity to finance, build, operate, and maintain infrastructure, where instead of government doing everything, a private partner contributes capital, they contribute expertise, technology, and efficiencies, while the public entity basically ensures alignment with public policy, regulation, and social objectives. So there's been very few examples of triple Ps in the water space in the country. I think the ones that we know that have worked. In your own province, Mbali, in KZN, the Caesar Water, in the Dolphin Coast to KwaDukuza municipality, has worked that concession. And one thing that was now beginning to see is that most of this concession that were done 20 years ago are actually coming to an end. So there's been that Caesar Water concession in KwaDukuza, which the private party was then contracted to finance, build, operate, and maintain water infrastructure over a period of time. There was a similar one in Nelspruit, Mbombela municipality, where a 30-year concession contract was awarded to Greater Nelspruit Utility Company. That was back in 1999. So I don't really have real information on how it works, but for the fact that it has run its course, we'll want to think that it has worked. So that's another way where water boards, governments, and private sector can work together. But currently, what is getting us excited, we are seeing this move towards alternative delivery models by water utilities like water boards. Rainwater is established in SPV together with Mbali in local municipality. And for us, it's a very good example of what we now call public to public, as opposed to public-private partnership. So it's public-public partnership. Although I understand in that model, there's also a space for private sector investment going forward. So we are all excited about this model because in my view, it will really reshape how we can support service delivery at local level by professionalizing service delivery through what we have been preaching, some of us, about the need to ring fence services at local level. So this is a ring fence service delivery mechanism, and we're quite excited, and we think that it will go a long way. But to just expand on this question, Mbali, in terms of what other financing models we can look at to unlock collaboration and impact in the sector. It is really becoming very evident that with the major infrastructure backlog that we're sitting with, and with municipalities struggling to finance new projects and maintain aging infrastructure systems, traditional funding, which is mainly from municipal budgets and government grants, and also from the development finance institutions, the likes of DBSA, is no longer enough. So what we require is new innovative financing models. And when we talk about this, what are we talking about? Just for you to highlight, and you mentioned some, and maybe I mentioned them also earlier on. We are talking about what we call blended finance. What this means is combining public, donor, and private capital to reduce the risk for private investors to come into the sector. So practically, this then requires government, or through the DFIs like the DBSA, as I said, to provide guarantees and concessional loans to attract private sector investments. So we need to explore this. It's really an opportunity because government, in terms of its fiscus, is also getting limited. So blended finance is one window that we're seeing. There's also an opportunity for what we call green bonds. You mentioned this. This entails municipalities or utilities issuing bonds to raise capital for water and sanitation projects that are then repaid over time from revenues. So what is exciting here is that the likes of Rainwater are already playing in this space. I think Rainwater has issued a number of green bonds. Triple P has spoken about, but the other way is what we call infrastructure funds that can be set up. What this entails is pulling together multiple municipal or utility projects into one investment vehicle or platform to attract investors. And what this does, it provides scale, and we are therefore able to attract patient funding, what we call patient funding and patient capital from the pension funds and insurance companies. Patient capital, we mean long-term financing. So your commercial banks usually give short-term financing, 10, 15 years, but you can attract patient capital based on the
Dr. Bethuel, I really hate to cut you short, but my administrators are pulling the plug on me right
No,
now.
sure. No, sure. This has
To
been
wrap
long.
up our discussion for today.
Yeah.
But I would like to really thank you for coming through and really sharing so much of your knowledge and expertise with us today. And I'm sure that the colleagues that are here with us have learned a considerable amount, and they really do want to continue with the discussions. The questions and the comments in the chats, they just keep coming. So I'm going to ask from the team to also share those questions with you so that you can respond to them, and then they maybe share the responses on the social media platforms of the ALCISA conference. But just in closing, colleagues, really thank each and every one of you for coming through and for engaging with us on this very important subject and topic, which is going to continue during the ALCISA dialogue in November, as I said earlier on. And just maybe in closing, Dr. Bethuel, if you can give us your closing remarks, as well as just to share with us what we can actually look forward to in the ALCISA dialogue as we close.
Yeah, thanks, Mbali. Yeah, I'm also sensitive to time, and actually this has been quite long.
Yeah.
So just in closing, so if I'm to close my eyes and see the sector in the next 10 years, 15, 20 years, I would like to see an integrated and seamless delivery value chain where all stages of delivering water and sanitation services are linked together, ensuring smooth flow of information, resources, and workflows. So this will call for what we call end-to-end. Okay, can I be protected? End-to-end alignment, focus on full project cycle.
Please mute yourself, Themba. Themba, please mute yourself.
Yeah, so I was talking about the need for integrated seamless delivery value chain. This will call for end-to-end alignment in terms of focusing on project life cycle in full, collaboration instead of fragmentation, digital process integration, customer-centric. So for the dialogue in November, Mbali, we are looking at a situation where there's going to be over about 90 papers spread across 8 themes of the dialogue that are going to be presented at the dialogue. And what's interesting for me is that most of those papers are written by practitioners in the water sector, and therefore they will be able to share knowledge based on real life experiences and lessons learned. So I'm looking forward to those kind of debates where we're talking about things that are evidence-based, lessons learned. So it's going to be a very interesting conference, and we invite everyone who's in this platform to attend and to invite other colleagues to attend. Thanks, Mbali.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bethuel. Thank you. And on behalf of the team that planned this event tonight, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to each and every one of you for joining us and staying on, even though we went over time. Our humble apologies for that, but we do hope that you found these discussions engaging, and we are going to continue with the discussions going forward. Please join the series as it continues, and we continue to have these discussions. Join us continuously. We are looking forward to seeing you in November at the ALCISA dialogue. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.